What's up, buddy?
Good to see you, dude.
Good to see you, man. We took last month off.
Yeah, we hadn't taken a month off like ever
No, it was our
since
it was
starting.
our first month off after like
Yeah,
2 dozen episodes or something.
yeah. So that was good. It was needed. Just we were both busy,
Totally.
and always good for a little refresh. But nice to be
Yeah.
back.
Well, I'm excited for today too, because I think we're going to be sort of doing something a little bit lighter today, which
A
is I
lighter.
think I think necessary because I just spent the morning publishing a piece on Israel Palestine, and I watched
Yeah,
the Grace and Grit movie over the
yeah,
weekend, and
yeah,
things have been heavy. So
yeah.
I
Totally. I
think we
mean,
figured let's kind of lighten up a little bit and
yeah. I mean, with the last. I mean, obviously we're still in the pandemic, but obviously it's changing quite a lot, and compared to the last year, and then not to mention at least for folks in the US, the politics of the whole last year too. It's just like, we can take a little time to uncork.
yeah, yeah, to
it's
uncork.
gonna it's gonna take a little bit. So yeah, another light episode today. Though we have some other more in-depth stuff planned
Yeah,
for
yeah. No,
upcoming
we'll we'll
episodes.
we'll 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 get back into the deep end eventually, but
Yeah, yeah.
I think this is a fun conversation. I mean, it's a conversation I noticed that like as I'm starting to see people again, and getting visitors and all that, it's sort
Yeah.
of like the default conversation that you turn to, like,
Yeah.
what have you been watching, what have you been enjoying, how have you
Yeah.
been sort of occupying your time over the
Yeah.
last year and a half of this sort of slow motion apocalypse that we've
Yeah.
been a
Yeah.
part of.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
yeah, so it'll be good, and I think we've got some fun things to talk about today. And I want to mention today that this is a special week for me and my family.
Hmm.
Yesterday was actually a special day that we call Life Day, which is
Hmm.
the anniversary of my daughter's liver transplant,
Oh,
which she got 7 years ago. She's 8 years
oh.
old now, and she's kicking ass, man. She's
That's
thriving.
awesome. What do you
She's
call the day again?
Life Day.
Happy Life Day.
Yep. Yep.
Happy Life
And
Day.
she's
That's awesome.
she really likes rainbows, so I bought her an LGBT cake to celebrate Life Day, and
Perfect.
that made her very happy.
Oh, so sweet.
Yeah.
Yay, that's beautiful.
Yeah, so it's a good week.
Yay.
Yeah, so let's jump into it. So today we're going to be doing Inhabit Your Entertainment. And
Yeah.
Ryan, I think what we're going to do here is a few things. Is first off, I think that we probably have a few things to say about how integral perspectives can sort of enhance and increase our enjoyment of the
Hmm.
world around us and of our culture, and particularly pop culture.
Yep.
I think that there's sort of a deepening that that occurs at integral stages that
Yeah.
your sort of your capacity for aesthetic appreciation just rapidly expands because
Hmm.
you can suddenly see where sort of all these artifacts,
Yeah.
where they live and how they relate to each other, and sort of
Right.
how we can kind of fold them together and how they inform our own sense of meaning and how
Uh-huh.
we interpret the world and
Yeah.
so forth.
Yeah.
So we could probably talk about that, like how we enact art and entertainment integrally.
Yeah.
And then we can actually talk about just some of our favorite shows and music and movies and
Yeah.
all these things that again, I think integral allows us a particular kind of insight in a particular way of enjoying
Yeah.
these cultural products. So I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to this, man.
Yeah, this is a fun one. And like you said, it's just nice to turn towards we say entertainment, which is an interesting word that we have. Because it's like what's art and what's entertainment, like we use those two different words, but colloquially they kind of mean different things. But and part of it, in terms of our economic system, these words mean different things, right? Like,
Mhm.
do you pay for something or not pay for it? And what form it takes. But sometimes entertainment, we can lose a lot of meaning in there because it just sounds, oh, it's just entertainment,
Right.
it's superficial, but that's not true. It could be. That's sometimes very, very true, and we can enjoy that. It can be totally valid enjoyment to appreciate something superficial, but there's a lot of forms of entertainment that also are really deep and meaningful as well.
Yep.
So, and when we're in crisis, it can be hard to like really appreciate art, as fundamental as art is, that I believe, to life. if you're having an emergency, you're not thinking about art in that moment. You're thinking about solving emergency. We've been quite emergency mode the last year.
Yes.
So turning towards this, which is a very important dimension of being human, this artistic expressiveness that we have to us inherently, it's important. So it's not just like, it is uncorking, being like, fuck, I just want to relax and like watch some TV or whatever. That's true too. And it's kind of like, no, we can breathe a little bit and return to this as part of who we are, so
Yeah. Well, and there's sort of a descending move too
yeah,
of just,
descending. Yeah.
like let's just enjoy ourselves, just a
Yeah.
little bit. Let's
Yes.
allow ourselves to feel joy and to have, a little bit of
Yeah.
fun. And I
Yep.
think it's no mystery that when this pandemic began, what did people do? Well, one of the things that, almost everyone I know did is they watched Tiger King on, on
I
Netflix,
I totally did that.
which was just this totally bizarre sort of distraction from, again, just the gravity
Yeah.
of everything that we were walking through.
Yeah.
So it's important. And we should say that never before in history has there been a more entertained society than ours.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I mean, it's crazy when you think about how completely surrounded we are by entertainment and by leisure, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, almost probably. I mean, it's like uh pros and cons there. I mean, like overall it's good, so there's so much more freedom and possibility with art. But our ability to really appreciate it can wane. It's kind of interesting, like the recent things about NFTs in the crypto world, which y'all, you probably have heard some of it because it's made big news, but we won't get into the technical details, but just digital form of art through cryptocurrency and being sold for bajillions of dollars. It's like, what does that do to our perception of of art? But we do have a ton of access to it. I mean, just surrounded by it, like at the click of a button. YouTube, Spotify, Google Images,
Yep.
just like those three alone, how much do you have access to in this
Yep.
moment? And which is great in terms of diversity. It's nuts. Like you can find the just perfect song for you in this moment of what exists out there. You can find that niche song or that niche show, um, way more than you could a long time ago. But the appreciation is quite different, I think, because hundreds of years ago, it was bananas to go see like a symphony or
Yeah.
something,
Oh,
right? It was
yeah.
just
Exactly.
like that was a big deal. And most likely, I don't know, some historians, if there are any historians listening to this, you can tell us, but just my sense is that like probably people learned how to create art on their own a little bit more, like the family member who could play a little music, because that was the only way you could get it. So there was a lot of personal connection, like, oh, dad or grandma or whoever played a little bit, because that was, you couldn't just turn on YouTube and you couldn't afford to go to the symphony, unless
Right.
you were rich. But now it's different. You don't have
Yep.
to pay anything.
Yeah, that's right.
And you have access to amazing art,
Yep. You
amazing,
really do. And a whole lot of crap as well.
and a whole lot of crap.
And this is actually, I think, one of the, for me anyway, one of the emergence
Yeah.
that comes out of the integral stage, and how it allows us to appreciate art is because, yes, we can acknowledge that there is just a ton of crap out there,
Yep.
right? But we
Yep.
can also recognize in ourselves how what the effects are of being so immersed in entertainment culture pretty much all the time, when we are just perpetually surrounded by a billion TV shows on a
Yep.
thousand different platforms and a thousand different video games, and this endless
Yeah.
cascade of streaming music. And I think one of the things it sort of does to
Yeah.
us is, I made a joke to you a couple days ago. It kind of turns us into these like entitled Roman emperors, and
Yeah.
we just have this attitude of like,
Oh my
entertain me,
gosh. Yeah, totally.
and if this isn't entertaining enough, I'm gonna have you publicly executed, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it sort of
Yeah.
turned us all into little entitled assholes in a certain kind of way. And
Yep.
integral, I think, helps us kind of break out of that to where we can watch something, or we can listen to something, or we can play a game or what have you, and we might have our own critiques, our own criticisms, like,
Yep.
oh, I maybe it could have been more like this than it is like that. But what I noticed is that
Yeah.
when I engage a piece
Right.
of art, chances are, if I'm spending time with a piece of art, I'm getting something out of it, right? And that's what I really want to lead with
Yeah.
when I enact something, and when I sort of share my enjoyment of a piece with other people.
Yeah.
I feel like we live in this culture where, because it's pop culture, which is sort of by necessity this strange mixture of art and commerce,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Right.
It's not just free floating art out
Yeah.
there that,
Right.
it's, I mean, you're being asked to oftentimes put money down in order to have a particular artistic experience. And I think
Right.
this is what drives sort of a certain level of cynicism in our culture and how
Yeah.
we, engage art. And it
Yeah.
really does turn us into like, oh, I'm comparing this artifact to some imaginary artifact that I have in my head. And if it doesn't
Hmm.
size up, then
Hmm.
I'm gonna bitch and moan about it
Yeah.
to other people. And
Yeah.
to me, I think this informs, again, it's just a different way of going about appreciating versus criticizing art. Like,
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, when they do sort of, you go to pitchfork.com, or you go to
Yeah.
a lot of, sort of the
Yeah.
review
The
sites
review
out there,
sites.
it's
Right.
almost like they're starting from a cynical place of wanting to dislike something, right? It's like
Yeah.
we define our taste in negative space. It's
Well,
not
it's
so
just a
much
lot
about,
easier. It's a lot easier. Like if you imagine writing an article, like that's probably critics define themselves that way because it's like if I just write really good things about an appreciation, it's like how sticky is it, you know? But
right.
like if I got some shit to say that's negative, then oh, even better. So
Yep. So there's
better
the commerce side
to,
driving
yeah,
criticism. I
yeah,
mean, right there. Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's like when I engage a piece of art, it's almost like I try to anyway. I try to start from a place of like good faith.
hmm,
And I try to remember that this artistic expression is coming from an actual human being.
yeah,
And that human being might read what I have to say about their art, right?
hmm,
And I want to, so there's a relationship there. And I
yeah,
think oftentimes we hold art as being, it's like this object. It's only an object
yeah,
of awareness, and we don't realize that there's a subject, usually a tremendously sensitive subject, sitting
hmm.
behind that artifact, trying to bring it into the world,
Well,
warts and all.
yeah, and it's like it's tied up with some of the things we said there. I mean, like like being a Roman, that you said being like on Spotify, like I have all these songs like "Bring Me Another." I dislike this one
That's
because I could have more. It's just like okay,
right.
and then um, I don't know. The cynicism is there too, through permeating it all. Um, yeah, it makes it hard to just appreciate that there is somebody there because so here's the thing: if creators are creating sometimes in a way that are fueled by cynicism, which can happen, right? It's like you're part of a very cynical industry, whether it's the music industry, Hollywood. You can create then from a cynical place, and then you get this like cycle: cynical creation, cynical consumption of it, and then kind of spirals out a bit. I think it's interesting because like with an artist who's like a painter, there's one person, and it's easier to sense that relationship.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a musician and it's one person, same thing, or just a small group, it's 4 people, 5 people, whatever. TV and movies, it's a whole nother thing because the
Yeah.
number of people involved is bananas. Same thing with
Or
video,
collaborative. Yep.
huge, and you have a big mix because you have maybe like the creator of TV shows incredibly passionate. Usually, it's a very passionate person about the art form.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and actors and all the people who are creatively part of it, but then you got the executive branch, the company who owns it, who's funding it, who wants to see results, who wants to market it, all this stuff. And it's impossible to take that out of the show too,
That's right.
right? So you get those elements that are not really about the art, but again, right now necessary to execute and bring it to fruition. It's mixed in there. And so then, and that's even easier with TV, I think, to get really cynical about that and just not feel like there are creators on the other end of it.
Right.
So it's like, no, it's part of this cynical machine that we're a part of, whether we know it or not, capitalism and in its worst form. And so sure, I can shit all over this movie or TV show
Right.
much easier than doing it on a one single musician.
That's right. That's right. And obviously that scales too, because
Yeah,
one of the things that we're going to talk about, for example, is the Grace and Grit movie,
yeah,
which was a production and involved a lot of people, but it's a because it's a more independent release. That means it had a smaller team, which means that folks like Sebastian Siegel, the director, uh, had more creative control, and therefore
yeah,
we can say this is more his baby.
Yeah, well,
than
and
when
that's
you
something that
watch
you and
like
I
an
know.
Avengers movie or
Yeah,
something.
but thing is that you and I know that, but I think that people do treat like a movie like that just the same. So like if it has a sheen of a
Yeah,
well produced, which more and more that's easier and easier. The bar is set lower, because we have better equipment that costs less. It's still costly to make a movie like that, but people don't know. It's just like, hell if I know. Could have been somebody else with a lot of money funding it to get some money out of it.
right.
Who knows how big the team is, but I know you and I know that that was much more of a passionate project with fewer people who really, really loved and cared
That's right.
about it.
That's right. It's
Hmm.
funny. This conversation actually reminds me of just a few days ago. I watched one of my favorite movies again. It's a movie that I'm strangely obsessed with.
Hmm.
Dazed and Confused.
Oh yeah.
And
Nice.
it's a fascinating movie because it's there's a streak of authenticity that runs through this movie, largely because the production of the movie was so chaotic and was
Hmm.
so kind of crazy. It was sort of this new
Hmm.
like Fast Times at Ridgemont High that launched 1,000 careers out of, I mean, it's crazy when you rewatch that movie and you see how many people got their start with
In that
this
one movie,
film,
yeah,
Ben
it's one of
Affleck
those.
and Parker
Yeah.
Posey and I mean it's
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey and so many folks got their start with this movie, but the actual making of the movie was this messy really chaotic affair where you had, the director, what's his name? Linklater, I think it was,
Oh
who
yeah,
who
that's right.
has this vision, right? And he's trying to execute the vision. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, it's his first movie where he got big funding from Universal, I think it was. And so, right away, when you get big funding, what's the
Yeah.
first thing they do? They start sort of cutting at your vision and trying
Yeah.
to edit it down and pare it down. But what was interesting about this production was that the production itself was so sort of organic to the point where like actors were giving notes on their own lines, which is kind of unheard of
Yeah,
in
right.
in those circles. And oftentimes they didn't know what they were going to shoot the next day. They're kind of figuring it up and scrambling, and they're creating a bigger role for
Yeah.
Matthew McConaughey, and they're doing
Yeah.
all this stuff sort of in real time as they're casting the movie or as they're filming the movie. And that actually, again, there's a rawness to that. There's an organicness to that I think brought in this streak of authenticity. And one of the things that was really,
Mm,
that really struck me while watching it is you can't make this movie today. You can't
yeah.
make a movie like this where your process is so kind
Yeah.
of chaotic and organic and all that. Everything
Right.
needs to be like
Yeah.
fully fleshed out before you even get, your
Right.
first penny of funding
Yeah.
from somebody.
Right.
So
Right.
it's interesting to revisit, films from 20, 25, 30 years ago and just seeing how the industry itself has changed over the years.
Yeah, totally. And now um it's really interesting, like with Netflix and HBO, when HBO especially was really focused on incredibly high-end content, kind of no matter what. Like we're going to create really, 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 really good shows. We're not about cranking out multiple shows, just high quality shows. And Netflix was kind of like that, I think, at first as well. Much more diversity of like shows that existed elsewhere, but like even their first shows that they were creating, much higher, much stronger focus on creating high quality content. But now both of them are moving towards the idea of more is better, than
That's right.
the quality, which again is going to feed into it. Like we can experience that as users, like as viewers, that if we don't experience like something that just blows us away and says, leave our jaw open or leave us bent over laughing so hard we can't take it, that kind of thing. It's just like, well, it feeds into itself,
That's
just
right.
like I'm starting to get a little cynical about like, they're gonna cancel all the good shows. Netflix has done that multiple times in the last few years where
Netflix is
like
known for that.
where shows are amazing. It's like, wow, you guys knocked it out of the park. It's amazing. But then they're like, nope. And it's like, okay, well, how long am I going to have faith that you all are going to put out a show that's quality and that will be around for more than a season? That kind of thing. So it's really interesting how that changes because, like, I think it goes to what you said. Like, you need to have it all put together, and it's a little bit more going towards sugar, of like less substance,
Yeah.
but gives you the feeling,
Right.
um, but it's interesting too because at the same time, oddly enough, I would have never thought this a decade ago. Disney Plus is like cranking out some really interesting shows in some in kind of different short season formats where I'm really liking them,
Yep.
And so, who the hell would have thought that I would have been watching a Disney Channel and
Yep.
really loving
Hey
it.
man, Loki's coming out this Friday.
I know, I saw it. I'm really stoked for it. I'm really stoked for it. And you know what I want to say, the other thing about TV and film for me, you know, I went to music school, so like, music has been a big home for me. But I would still say that film and television is like one of the most highest art forms because it incorporates everything:
That's right.
visual, music, design, performance. I mean, it's all put into one, and obviously can turn out horrifically, you know, because you have so many ways in which it could be bad. But when it's good, it's just like, wow,
Yep.
like it's amazing what we
Yeah.
can create.
I feel a similar way about video games. Video games
Video
being
games too.
probably the
Yes.
most
Yes.
multidisciplinary sort of
I agree.
art form out there right now.
Yeah, I agree.
That requires 1,000 people just to
And there, it's the one place where it seems like all in on quality and depth of the game is still reigning supreme, not a cranking out method. Like that's why we'll be like, when is this game going to come out?
right.
They're still developing it. So the video games industry has that going for it still, where there is like a little bit of the trash gaming. Like I think like, you know, Apple trying to create their little gaming platform, which they keep seeing it like join the arcade. I'm like, no, these look lame. These games look lame.
I'm not gonna lie, I joined it and there's a couple games on there I like.
Do you like, well, I wasn't doubting that there will be some games on there, but I'm just like not enough for me to like invest when there are
Right.
other amazing games out there, you know?
Right. Well,
Yeah.
someone asked a question and I want to respond to it
Oh,
earlier than later because I think it sort of informs I think the foundation of the show. So he asked, this session is described
yep.
as a practice-based series designed to help you embody your own unique expression of integral being.
Yep.
What's happening here? What is the point of your conversation about entertainment?
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Joshua. And I just want to say that appreciating and enacting art, whether we know it or not, is a practice. It's a practice
Yeah.
actually that we are perpetually engaged in.
Mm-hmm.
We are engaging and appreciating art at almost every minute of our, because again, our lives are so saturated with entertainment and with art and with these various cultural products. And I think that living an integral life, it means exactly that. I mean, it means living a fully comprehensively integral life, which means you are bringing these perspectives to everything that you experience, whether it's watching Sharknado and
Yeah.
or it's watching a film like Grace and Grid, or it's losing yourself in a fantasy series like Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, there is an opportunity for us to bring more consciousness, more awareness, and we can notice how integral ideas and perspectives actually open up new channels of meaning within a particular artwork. So an
Yeah.
integral, someone who is has an integral center of gravity, who's looking at a given piece of art, no matter where we locate that piece of art on the spiral, they are going to have a different enactment of that piece of art than someone at a, with a different cosmic address.
Yeah, for
This
sure.
is sort of one of the wonderful mysteries of art and
Yeah.
how we receive it.
Yeah.
And we can either receive art unconsciously
Yeah.
or we can do it consciously. And I think
Yeah.
that, I actually encourage people to do a little bit of both. I mean, I'm not saying we have to be so high-minded when we're sort of, trying to have a good time and, tuning out with a movie or whatever. But like, again, that just bringing a little bit of integral sensibility to these things, you start to notice things that you might not have otherwise noticed.
Yeah. And thanks, Corey. That was great. And so I would extend this a little bit. I kind of mentioned earlier, but expression is fundamentally part of who we are. So in realization process from Julie Blackstone, I'm a teacher with that. We can attune to the quality of our voice, and usually it's done here, quality of our expression, but we express ourselves in so many ways. And we can have constrictions and fragmentation in our being around expressing ourselves. And art is the word we give to the most pure creative expression of ourselves. In the line where we draw between what is art and not, it's not important. But yeah, so one is like touching into this conversation about art as part of who we fundamentally are, expressive beings, and then not getting caught up in the word entertainment, because that's the word we use a lot. And art, it's like, what is art, what's entertainment, and people will have all kinds of different definitions, but I would argue that it's all gets put into the same bucket. And we're just, what we've been talking about is talking about the range of depth and appreciation and cynicism, all these things about these different forms that it can take, but that's part of the conversation. So is cynicism a fragmentation of our being? Yeah. And that gets reflected in art and how we create the art and how we take it in. Um, I also would say, from an integral perspective, I think that art is one of the most amazing places where we work out our shit as a society, because it's unregulated. It's not refereed in a foundational way. It is, we have FCC in the United States, we have Twitter and people talking about, we have reviews, but really, like, people can just create. I mean, like, even in the United States, the right to free speech is, like, we have that built into our system, and it's a big deal. And so, like, you can create whatever you want. And because of that, we can work out our issues, and we often do. We create movies, we do stand-up comedy, we create music, and this is how we talk about what are we experiencing right now. So inhabit that. I want to inhabit fully what's happening right now, as imperfect as it might be, and give voice to it. Because if I can't give voice to it, it's subject to me. It's not an object to me. And that's a big deal about integrals, turning objects into subjects so we can evolve and mature and grow. So we have to inhabit what the hell's going on. And it's often done beautifully by just expressing, like, don't think about it. Just tell me what you're feeling. Pissed off, happy, empty, full, whatever, manic. You just say what's going on and express that in art, because art doesn't require you to, like, be perfect or have it figured out. And so through that, yeah, we evolve. It's like, that's where we're evolving through, whether we know it or not. But we can dumb it down by using only the word entertainment, by only focusing on, oh, entertainment and Netflix. So why are we talking about this stuff? Well, that's just the form that we're taking right now. That's our evolution right now. That's us. It's not part of us. That's part of us. That's part of the outer reflection. So
It's
yeah,
all beautifully said.
that's what I would say about, like, oh, the last thing, even if it is about fun is part of being human. And so this is very common amongst people who get super spiritual or super integral, is taking things way too seriously. And actually, what I would say is that integral, in my experience, like Kin, brings in a sense of humor. Like, in his writings, he would talk deeply and passionately, but I always appreciated how he would also be humorous.
Yes.
He would be funny. And it was like, oh, we can be really deep and crack a joke and have a beer. Wow, that's different. So here I'd say, inhabit your recreation, inhabit your fun. And if that feels weird, then that's a fragmentation, because recreation is part of who we are. But as we mentioned, we've been in crisis mode, and some people may be completely in crisis mode still in this moment. In which case, recreation and fun is out of the picture. But that's a pain. That's a pain point if that can't be part of who we are, because it is part of who we are. So
Beautifully said.
yeah.
And just look at that word, recreation,
Yeah.
recreation. Right?
Yeah, nice.
Think of
Yeah.
recreation as like, oh, I'm kind of tuning out, or I'm sort of, setting all this down. No, what you're actually
Yeah.
doing is, again, whether you're doing it consciously or unconsciously, you are always recreating the products of the culture that you find yourself situated in. And guess what, guys?
Yeah.
Pop culture, at least for, you and I, Ryan, living here in the United States in the 21st
Yeah.
century, pop culture is our culture, warts
Yeah.
and all.
Yeah.
And one of the common things that one of the common ways that I describe pop culture is, in many ways, this is mysticism wrapped in cellophane, right?
Mhm.
So you can find all stages, all lines, all states of consciousness. All of this can be
Well,
found
yeah.
in various cultural artifacts that we are surrounded
Yeah.
by. And sort of the
Yeah.
fun part is, playing that connect the dots, where you can kind of constellate your favorite artifacts, which you in turn recreate
Yeah.
in your own life,
Yeah.
in terms of how you engage the world, how you interpret the world, and how you bring more novelty back into the world. All
Yeah.
of this is informed by the art that we're surrounded by and that we are constantly consuming during our waking hours.
Hmm.
So I hope that's helpful, Joshua. He said thank you. Then I think
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
then I
No,
think
it's
he
a good question.
yeah, totally. And
Yeah.
so maybe you just mentioned Ken,
Yeah.
and you mentioned his his he's got a great sense of humor,
Yeah. He
and
does.
sometimes that sense of humor is used to sort of to bring out the depth, to sort of give contrast to depth. And one of the big cultural events in Integral Land, one of the biggest events that we've had in a long time, is the release this past weekend of the Grace and Grit movie,
Hmm.
which is a tremendously Powerful film, very powerful,
Mm,
very sweet, very very deep and moving,
mm,
and also in places damn funny, right? I think they did such an amazing job of capturing Ken's sort of cagey personality.
mm.
Stuart Townsend, I mean, absolutely just knocked it out of the park with his representation of Ken Wilber. It's a little bit harder to gauge Mina Savari's representation of Treya just because
Right.
we don't have a lot of footage of Trey. I've known
Yeah.
Ken for 20 years. I can watch this and I can compare it to the Ken I know and be like, man,
Yeah.
you really kind of nailed this. But when I talked to Ken in a couple weeks about his experience of watching the movie,
Yeah,
one of the
that'd be
questions I'm
great.
going to have for him is, I can see you in this movie, Ken, because I know you. Was that
Mm,
Treya? Was Treya
mm,
captured by
mm.
Mina Savari's performance? I'll be really, really curious
Yeah.
what his take is. But did you watch the movie, Ryan?
I haven't got to watch it yet. I really want to. I'm going to 100% watch it because the book was just one of my favorites. Like as many people will say, it's so much love and beauty in there. So I'm really looking forward to it. I was really interested to hear some of the reactions, and I'm glad we started a conversation with this because I saw only two professional critic reviews of it, and they're both just shit on it.
Yeah.
But and so part of that, from an integral perspective, because so it's great that I haven't seen it, you have, because we can really inhabit both of those perspectives. That the criticisms that I saw, one was from New York Times and the other one was from Variety, and I would be certain that uh, this doesn't mean that the movie is good. What I'm about ready to say, but I discount their criticism because, and we have to be careful with this in the integral community, the being arrogant and dismissing people on being like you're not integral enough. But here, I would say that like to appreciate grace and grit, you're going to have to be able to inhabit an integral level of development
Mm-hmm.
and the spiritual waking up side sufficient enough, because otherwise it's none of it will make sense. Like by default, it could be the best movie ever, but if you can't appreciate it because it's not your cosmic address, at the moment, it's going to seem like garbage no matter what.
Yep.
So like part of it was kind of like, I don't know that these people, based on what they said, particularly based on what they said, actually, it wasn't just that they didn't like it, but it's like the things they said, I'm like, I doubt you even meditate. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like a kind of thing. So it's kind of like, oh, isn't that interesting?
You even meditate,
Do
bro?
you even meditate, bro? Dude, did I tell you about that? Like Vince and I had a whole thing like where we want to do these series. Like, do you even meditate? That was one response. Do you even? What's the original one? Do you even lift weights or
Yep.
whatever?
Bro.
Do you
No,
even
yeah,
meditate, bro?
all that's totally true. And I'll talk about the New York Times
Yeah.
sort of reception.
Yeah.
And then
Your review was different because you can,
yeah,
take the
that's right.
perspective. So
That's right. Well, and then I want to, share maybe my own review of the
yeah, that'd
because
be great.
maybe we can see sort of some of the differences here because
Yeah.
my impression of the New York Times review was that this was almost like you could have predicted this review. I mean,
Yeah. Right. Just
for decades.
auto-generate it.
Yeah, seriously, for decades, Ken Wilber's main criticism of the New York Times
Uh,
specifically and mainstream media in general is that they have exactly two categories for spirituality. It's either crazy religious fundamentalism
yes.
or
Or
it's
woo.
crazy wacko woo new age.
Yeah. That's it.
And when they sort
Which is
of
a very rational orientation
yeah,
to it.
no, that's right.
Rational level development. Yeah. Yeah.
And whenever another sort of form of spirituality comes down the line, they don't know where to put it, and
Got to be in one of the two buckets.
it kind of pisses them off. And honestly, we saw the
Mhm.
same sort of reception
Yeah.
to the two other movies that played, my two of my favorite movies, which played with the same themes as Grace and Grit.
Yeah.
And they're actually the two movies that we included in our amazing episode about using
Yeah.
film
Yeah.
to go through the spiral
Right.
that we use for turquoise. And those movies are The Fountain
Yeah.
and Cloud Atlas,
Yeah.
both of which also included a number of signifiers
Yeah.
for which many people who watched the movies did not have the reference, right?
Yeah.
And when you experience
Yeah.
signifiers for which you have no signified, usually our reaction to that is somewhat hostile.
Yeah, can I interject one example real quick?
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
like one for me. Like if you had a movie where it was a bunch of jokes about calculus, I'm not gonna get it.
right,
I don't know. I don't do calculus.
right.
and I might not be aware enough to say that, and maybe like this movie sucks, but it's just like I don't know calculus. That's why it sucks.
Yep,
So go ahead. Yeah.
that's right. So I wanted to, I'm hoping to maybe contrast, again, I think it proves the point that we enact art differently
Yeah.
according to our cosmic addresses. So I
Yeah.
wanted to share, if that's okay with you, Ryan, I want to share
Yeah.
my own
Yeah. Absolutely.
appreciation of Grace and Grit, which is coming from my cosmic address.
Yeah. Cool.
Using, sort of my own reference in relation to, the main ideas and the signifiers that I saw being conveyed in the movie. So this was actually, I wrote this to Sebastian Siegel, the director, on Friday night after watching, and I was so floored after watching the movie that I spent,
Hmm.
probably two hours or so crafting this appreciation.
Nice.
Let's see what other
Yeah.
people think.
Yeah.
So this will take a few minutes, so bear with me. So I just finished watching. What a blessing. All I can say is thank you to Sebastian Siegel so much for bringing this into the world. It's such a beautiful tribute to Treya, to Ken, and most notably to the love that they shared. Hearing Ken's voice at the end turned me into a puddle. Now all I want to do is drive down to Denver to give him a big hug and tell him how much I love him. The movie actually makes me feel closer to Ken, and that alone is such a gift. So thank you to everyone who made this movie for that. It really strikes me how much this movie was set within that invisible second person betweenness that Ken and Treya had, and how rare it is to see that so well executed in film. Mina and Stewart were both perfect in their roles. I honestly cannot imagine better casting. But beyond their individual performances, it was that chemistry between them that really made this movie so special and such a fitting shrine to Ken and Treya's love. I also really appreciate and admire Sebastian's directing. It felt to me like the film unfolded as a series of memories, assembled in a purposeful way, which is evocative of the book itself, of course, as a series of journal entries assembled and edited in order to tell a story that would be meaningful for other people. So I appreciated that as an homage to the original book, but it was also evocative of something far deeper and nearer, the ground of being itself. The directing style seemed to reflect one of Ken's lines from the film. Quote, perhaps you, like most people, feel that you are basically the same person you were yesterday. You probably also feel that you are fundamentally the same person you were a year ago. Put another way, you never remember a time when you weren't you. In other words, something in you seems to remain untouched by the passage of time. Your mind, your body, your feelings all have changed with time, but you know that something has not changed. Something feels the same. Unquote. This film evokes a similar state for me. We are all different people at different moments in our lives, and yet we know that something seems to remain untouched by the passage of time. This movie reveals the parts of us that are touched and the parts that remain forever untouched. Postmodern movies are self referential. Postmodern movies, like this one, are capital S self referential. The directing style seems to be holding a mirror to consciousness itself and how we remember our own lives, not to mention how we remember our favorite films, not as a linear sequence from A to B to C like an Avengers movie, but as a poetic flow of contrasting scenes, feelings, interactions, and tones, all constellated by our own interior patterns of meaning making and projected onto the empty screen of witness consciousness. This is how the film presented itself to me, as a purposeful series of shifting memories. And behind and between every scene, both love and ground shine forth. Every scene, every transition, every fade to black and fade to white is lit with radiant emptiness. Love and transcendence, impermanence and eternity, passionate equanimity. These are the central themes of Grace and Grit that cause so many people to fall in love with the book. And I'm so satisfied with how they come through in this film. I absolutely loved this movie. It's a precious gift, an absolutely stunning tribute to Treya, to Ken, to love, and to ground. So, congratulations to Sebastian and to everyone involved in bringing this story to life. You've helped make this world just a little more beautiful, a little more loving, and a little more wise than it was before. P.S. It was, here's my criticism, It was jarring to hear a Stuart Davis song coming out of someone who did not have Stu's famous Queen News of the World face. But I get it. You can't have too many bald-headed ectomorphs in one movie.
That's funny. Yeah.
So that is my hopefully non-spoilery
Yeah.
review of Grace and Grip.
Yeah, lovely, man. Very beautifully said. That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I would love to, we have a thread in the community, Integral Life community. We're inviting other folks who've watched the movie to share some of their own reflections. And, criticisms are fine. I think all of that is fine. But, for me, I really wanted to start from a place of appreciation. Again, like I was saying earlier, I
Yeah.
tend to approach these things. I kind of start with 100 points and I deduct from there. Whereas a lot of reviewers, I feel like they start at 0 and the artifact has to earn points.
Well, yeah, and you gotta wonder, it's like with these critics, like they're just doing their job where like, well, like why are you watching this movie? You know
For
what I
sure.
mean? Like if I had to watch movies that just didn't call to me to watch, I'm probably not gonna write as good a review, you know? And so it's kind of a funny thing to make that your job. And like there are some good reviewers out in the world who really give it their all, but I think it's gotta be hard to just like, I'm gonna review everything and
That's
come up
right.
with good reviews.
That's right.
But I was seeing online that the audience reviews are really good overall.
Yeah, I think it's got like a 95% audience rating right
Yeah,
now.
96 on Rotten Tomatoes. On
Yep.
Amazon, there's, now a handful in there. And so, yeah, it looks to be like, even just reading through some of the reviews too, real quick here, and seeing some of the phrases in your review, that there's probably, it's probably certain that it's not like what the critics say, like, where it's just like total garbage, worthless. It's like, no way, like, because of how touched people really are,
Right.
watching it. It's like, come on. If it was really bad, it'd be impossible for people to be, touched deeply by it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so I'll be curious, Ryan, when you watch it,
Yeah.
whether you resonated with my own sort of enactment of the
No,
film.
it's interesting because obviously, like, we're in a unique position, as maybe some of our listeners, viewers here are, where we probably read the book, a long time ago, maybe multiple times. We've appreciated Ken's work, maybe even know him, things like that. And um, so we feel really connected to it, so to see that there's going to be bringing to life something really near and dear to our heart. So I just imagine it's going to be hard not to be touched,
That's right.
and there's always, like, I think, like, if a person is really, I think with film and television, here's what's interesting. Even with a good faith, taking good faith, I think a lot of people just aren't equipped to make objective criticisms or critical feedback, because you don't understand what goes into the process. Like, and I've been a part of a little bit, right? Like, I've helped with the television show with Stuart Davis, Sex, God, Rock and Roll. And like, I mean, one, if you can't even list off, like, say 5 to 10 positions that go into 10 roles that go into making a movie, how can you possibly provide criticism? Is it the writing? Is it the editing? Is it directing? Is it the casting? Is it the set design? Is it, like, what was it? And the direction is almost always the thing that feels most mysterious, because it's like, how does one point to the director? People who are really familiar with film can do that, but usually people can only point towards actors and maybe the lines they're using, the screenplay. So that's just something to know,
That's right.
and but if you can, there could be feedback, right? Saying like, how could have been executed better, but you have to differentiate the execution versus like the heart of what's being put on the screen,
Yep. Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
very well said.
Yeah.
And I think, to resonate with what you're saying, I just want to be clear with people. As I was watching the movie and as I was writing this piece, I was very aware that like I cannot see this objectively. I
Mm.
just can't. I can't watch this movie objectively. Like I've known Ken too long. Like it hits different when you know the guy. You
I
know
don't
what I
think
mean?
anybody, I would say, like, in being integral, nobody can watch it purely objectively. That's a
Sure.
myth of rationalism. It's just like, what is our subjectivity we're bringing in? So our subjectivity is understanding the story and knowing the people, having that connection, like you said, that there are real people behind this. Like, this is a real story from somebody near and dear to us who lost their partner.
Yep.
This is a real story, and these are real people who care about it.
Yep.
So we have that, and the subjectivity of the critics who do that, they have none of that, and probably who've never, and they maybe don't have the requisite depth and experience to even appreciate it, even if they would have given it a beautiful review if they could.
That's right. Well, and I think
So
that's just one example of how, again, sort of the integral altitude can invite fresh takes, fresh perspectives. You can see a few things that you maybe
yeah,
may not have noticed 5 or 10 years ago, before sort of your own integral consciousness came into maturity. And one of the things I noticed, Ryan, is that this applies both to integral, quote unquote, integral works of art that are out there, of which, let's just say, there are very few. There's not a whole lot of
yeah,
integral artifacts in our culture, at least
yeah.
not, exerting a whole lot of influence at this point
No,
in time.
it's not
That'll
possible
that'll change, right?
over
We'll get
time. Yeah.
there. We'll get there.
Yep.
Right now we're still in sort of our postmodern meta phase where everything
Yeah.
is
Really, we
very,
are.
very meta, and
Yeah.
we love that. And again, I do sort of think
Yeah.
that one of the dividing lines between postmodern art and integral art is one of my phrases from my appreciation. Postmodern art really is self-referential. You create a piece of art, and
Yes, it
that
is.
artifact exists within the artifact. It
Yeah.
refers to itself. It's sort of
Yep.
eating its own tail.
Yes.
Integral, I think, turns that circle into a sphere.
Yeah.
Right, and it's still self-referential, but no longer lowercase l. It's not an artifact referencing an
Yeah.
artifact. It's actually an artifact that is reflecting consciousness itself. It's
Mm.
actually showing you something important about your own interior experience right now. And those have always been some of the most powerful films. Now, oftentimes, again, you only see that in sort of this, thin little layer of integral art that exists in the world. But one of the other things about the integral sensibility that I just really, really grown to appreciate, and I think you and I have talked about this before, Ryan, is
Yeah.
is how it deepens your appreciation of like everything else.
Yeah.
Like art doesn't need to be integral in order for you to extract meaning and enjoyment out of
Yeah.
it.
This is probably the most important point to me.
Totally.
Is that like, because at that point you can get freed up. It doesn't mean that we always have to be careful that like it doesn't mean that like our perceptions of everything is accurate and perfect and good, but it really does open a door of appreciation. So like if I watch, if I watch a movie that's more traditional or whatever, mythic, sociocentric kind of thing, I can, if it's a good movie, I can appreciate it and be like, that's what it's supposed to be. That's the form it takes. Okay, great. If it's a movie that's just super stupid, I'm like, that's what it is. It's a super stupid movie, and that's what I'm in the mood for. Like, you can appreciate the art at different levels for what it is, because that's within us. It's not
That's right.
something that we transcend and get rid of, transcend and include. So it makes it easier. You can appreciate it. Now we still, long for content at wherever we're at. You know what I mean? Like, so if we're relatively mostly at integral kind of level of development, we're going to want that kind of content. But you know, we don't have to be limited and
That's right.
exclude everything else. And it just makes it much wider possibility for enjoyment.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of tend to divide the integral sensibility into two buckets. There's sort of integral emergent, right? And that would
Mhm.
describe like integral art made by
Right.
integral people for
Yeah.
integral people,
Yeah.
as an example.
Yeah.
Then you have sort of integral as universal donor, right? Because there's this recognition that
Ah, that's a great phrase,
right?
Corey.
All
Nice.
previous stages are part of my anatomy somehow. So all art is speaking to some piece of myself, whether it's the highest piece of myself or the lowest part of myself or somewhere in between. Art is speaking directly to some facet of my being, right now. Again, no matter if it's
Mm,
Cloud Atlas or Arrival or Tiger King, this is all speaking to some part of you. Some part of you. It's speaking
yes.
to the Tiger King in you, and all of
Yeah.
all of us all
Yeah,
of us have a,
totally.
a hidden Tiger King
Yeah, and the thing is
waiting
like
to get out.
yeah, and not being aware of that potentiality within us, that's where you get real shadow stuff coming up that causes harm. Like so
Totally.
it's really important to be like, yeah, it's
Yep.
fucking Tiger King and all this.
Totally.
That's why we would watch it, because if they're like, come on, why else would we watch it? Yeah, man, Corey, that's a good phrase. Did you come up with that one? Integral universal donor?
No, I,
Yeah.
it's out. It's floating around.
Oh, that's a good one. That's
I'm,
a
I'm
very
not,
good one.
I'm not going to claim credit for it.
Oh, yeah, I like that phrase. That's it.
You know,
That's right. Yeah.
and you know what it does. Like, for example, here's just another example. I've been working on for, I don't know, off and on the last year and a half or so, maybe longer. This integral appreciation of one of my favorite bands, Nine Inch Nails.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I've got this whole document that like
Yeah.
all his lyrics, and actually I think what it's doing is it's showing Trent Reznor's actual sort of breadcrumb
Yeah.
trail towards enlightenment,
Yeah.
actual, states of enlightenment. And it's funny because it's not something, it's something that I see again from my cosmic address as I enact his art. I don't know if he sees it the same way from his cosmic address in
Yeah.
his art,
But
but
you
like
see it.
I see something undeniably real there. And I
Yeah.
see this actual progression through multiple states until he actually arrives at something like
Yeah.
source or home
Yeah.
or what have you. And
Yeah.
it's astonishing because I know I wouldn't see that if I didn't have this language available
Yeah.
to me of
Yeah.
being
Right.
able to recognize states of consciousness. And
Yeah.
just as one example, because this is probably, other than the I want to fuck you like an animal song, other than Closer,
Okay.
his most famous song was the song Hurt. And I
Yeah.
think that there's a hidden message in Hurt that like I've never seen anyone comment on. I've never seen anyone even like pick this up before. And to me, it's like from where I'm sitting, it's bloody obvious. And that's, and I'll sum it
Yeah.
up in a paragraph. So this is from his album, the Downward Spiral, which came
Mm-hmm.
out in 95, 94, I think.
95. I know 94, 94, 94, I think. Yeah.
One of my all-time favorite albums. I'm talking about Trent moving closer and closer towards something like self-transcendence.
Mm-hmm.
This sudden break towards self-transcendence is itself foreshadowed in Trent's ultimate psalm of self-destruction, the downward spiral, which, after a full hour of descending through layer after layer of despair, desperation, and dissociation, the album completely flips its own thesis inside out with an explosion of distortion and a sudden thunderbolt of radical self acceptance. And the final lyrics in that song are, if I could start again a million miles away, I would keep myself, I would find a way. Which is just
Yeah.
it's a level of self-acceptance. Again, you've been through
Mm-hmm.
this like brutal hour
Mm-hmm.
of self-deconstruction. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, just peeling back layer after
Mm-hmm.
layer after layer until nothing is left but just loathing and
Mm-hmm.
and misery. And yet, despite it all, there's this flash of recognition in the very very final lyrics of the song, which again, it's like it redeems the entire album.
Mm-hmm.
This to me is fucking powerful art.
Mm-hmm.
This
Yeah.
is powerful art. And it's a theme that I just haven't seen a whole lot of people pick up on
Mm-hmm.
when they're talking about this album and how this album fits into this artist's overall catalog.
Right, right. Corey, I got like to imagine you having a shed that's filled with like corkboard and like notes on Trent Reznor with like string, tying things together. And you're like integral Sherlock Holmes in there. I'm telling you, it's all connected there. I
Spiritual
love it.
conspiracy, man.
Yeah, no, I love it. Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's what's interesting is that like
My favorite band, if you can't tell.
heck yeah, man, and they're high on my list as well. And but it's interesting, like returning to music like that as we're always maturing and growing, and returning back and seeing new things that we haven't seen before because we couldn't have appreciated it, like that kind of perspective at that time. I couldn't appreciate that, kind of thing, because where I was at was more of depressed, angry state,
Right.
anyways, so
Right.
which was really great for that.
Exactly.
But yeah, so like you said, kind of like in the integral universal donor kind of thing, being able to go back and see different forms of art, no matter what it is, and appreciating it in
Dude,
new ways.
you made such a killer point right there, which is that, art is not inert. It's
Yeah.
not inert. It's constantly psychoactive. And again, its psychoactive qualities are completely dependent on the cosmic address that's addressing it in the first place. So
Hmm.
you can have a piece of art that's been in your life for say 30 years, as this album almost has been for me, and I can reflect on how different my interpretation and my experience of the album has been over the years. Like when
Hmm.
it came out and I was 16, 17 years old, it hit in a particular way.
Yeah.
10 years later, I'm seeing something different in this same work of art. And
Yeah.
now that I'm, a fully middle-aged man with a mustache, it hits different and I see
Yeah.
different themes. I'm able to pull something fresh out of it. So it's, that's kind of the amazing thing about art is it grows with you, it grows alongside you, right? And it actually prompts and reflects growth in different ways at different times
Yeah,
throughout your
totally.
own developmental trajectory.
Yeah, and something that's really interesting for me, just a general rule thus far, is that you know, good art, and I don't mean it doesn't. Again, whether it's silly, fun, or really deep, doesn't tell you what you should feel or think, in regardless of developmental level. Like it just is what it is, and then of course, if it's created at a certain developmental level, and the person of that same developmental level watches it, then it's going to be really synced up. But I think that's what's great is so that because of it was trying to tell you, hit you over the head with it, like sometimes you see this like especially with documentaries these days, like there was a time when Netflix documentaries were I really loved them in general, and then it got to the point where it's just like I see the title of the documentary, I'm like, listen, I already know what you're going to tell me, and I'm not really interested in watching the documentary because you're going to just shove it down my throat even if I agree with you, rather than presenting it as an art form. Like just write an article instead,
Yeah,
like just write a report and give me the information like an encyclopedia kind of thing, an investigation. That's great, but that's not art. Art moves you in some way,
that's right.
and because of that, I think we can go back to it over and over because Trent, just created downward spiral. It was just, here it is. It's his process. And so it wasn't telling you, you better have this conclusion when you listen to this. It's like, no, here it is.
Yep.
Turn it on,
Yep.
crank it up if you want.
That's like anti-art,
Yeah, that's why, yeah.
right? Trying to like force a
But
particular
it
interpretation.
happens so much, and I've seen that happen. I mean, no, it happens throughout all levels. You can see
Mm,
that happening there. I mean, it still happens, especially in postmodern art. You see that in green meme stuff where it's just like, okay, like you could do the same thing with all the same values, but make it beautiful and
mm,
hit me. But instead, you're trying to make the message more of the important thing, and the message is great, but not like art.
right,
Embody it,
right.
inhabit it, write the report over here, and that'll be equally meaningful.
Dude, this is an important point because this is, I think, what a developmental sensibility allows us in terms of how we enact our art, because we can look at a particular artifact and we can notice how it lands for us in terms of our own development. Like I just said, it's going to
Yeah.
hit different when you're 16 than when you're 26 than when you're
Yep.
46, right?
Yep.
So there's your own development, and that art is sort of reflecting different qualities of your own development. But then there's actually your appreciation of like the artist, him or herself, and their overall developmental trajectory,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So
Mm-hmm.
like with Nine Inch Nails, I'll just stick with this example because it's one that I know that I know really, really well. When you look at, this guy's work over the span of an entire career, you see very, very clear development. And
Mm-hmm.
in Trent's case, it was sort of, there's two halves that I see to his career. One was sort of the path of deconstruction, which then brought him to a path of reconstruction. And you can see this in his first album. So his first album, Pretty Hate Machine, is basically I hate myself and I want to fuck. Then then Broken comes out, it's I hate myself and I want to kill. Then Downward Spirals, I hate myself, I want to die. By the time The Fragile comes out, there's no more self to hate. I mean, he literally has songs called Into the Void,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where
Yeah.
there's something that is just like he's run out of layers of loathing,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he's just sort of smeared up against source, right? He's
Mm-hmm.
smeared up against the ground of being, like a freaking bug on the windshield at
Mm-hmm.
that point, because he's been through so many sort
Mm-hmm.
of deconstructive layers. But then the second half of his career is sort of like taking these shards and fragments, right? That he's just smashed to smithereens throughout his career and reassembling them into something new, to the point where now in the 2020s, he's winning, Golden Globes for doing soundtracks for a Disney movie. I
Yeah.
mean,
No, that's what
it's
I
a
was gonna say.
strange
Like,
trajectory.
yeah, that he won a Grammy for the soundtrack of Soul. It should
Yeah.
give you an indication that there's no way that that guy didn't go through something to end up from all those albums to there. You would never guess that.
And
Yeah.
just being able to appreciate an artist's growth. And this is true for any
But
artist. You can see this in Stuart Davis. You can see, I mean,
yeah.
choose your artist. You can track sort of the developmental maturation of, not just their expression, but of the actual human being and the artist's
Well, that's why I
intent.
was saying, like, when I was saying about that art being an honest way that where we work out our shit and evolve, this is an example of like why that's the case, because it's so easy to see that because it's a really honest space. typically
Yep.
speaking. Now we have to be honest with ourselves too, because I think it goes both ways, like you said, or too, that like look at ourselves and how we've evolved and like what we were consuming or in what we found entertaining 20 years ago versus 10 years ago. And some of it might be the same. Some of it like carries through. And that's like the really good stuff, right? That like if we still to this day are like appreciate it,
Yep.
regardless of wherever level it's coming from, it was good stuff.
Yep.
But there's a lot of things where we like, oh, it's like, oh, I can't believe I was into that thing, whatever, 15 years ago. So there's some like humbleness there in inhabiting and feeling our own evolving process, our own unfolding that's happening right now too. I think that's always really important for us integral folks, is to know that this is continuing, because it really opens up this like space to be able to see things and like appreciate the spiral, to be, part of a universal donor creation, so that's really relieving and exciting. And it can be easy to start having a shadow of being like forgetting that this is continuing,
Right.
that even in this moment, that's continuing. Where right now, there's things we're not seeing about what we're consuming, and in 5 years, we'll see it differently and have a deeper appreciation for it.
That's the amazing thing, is that there's always something in the art that we love that is perpetually going over our heads, and we'll
Yeah,
catch up.
yeah,
We'll catch up eventually, but it sort of keeps you going, right?
yeah,
It keeps
yep.
you going, and it keeps you in relationship with a
In
particular,
relationship,
with a particular piece of art, and noticing how that, again, how that relationship actually changes over time,
that's
which,
a
which
yeah.
I just find freaking miraculous. I think there's another
Mhm.
another way that the integral stage helps us appreciate things more deeply, is noticing when things are, there's a number of artifacts out there, Ryan, that I wouldn't quite describe as integral,
Mhm.
right? I'm not like convinced an integral mind was putting this all together or what have you, but there's certain pieces of art that I will just say are very integral friendly, right?
Mhm.
One of them I'm thinking of, for example, is one of my favorite shows from the last year, Ted Lasso.
Yeah, yeah, that was one of
You
my
seen
favorite.
that?
100%. Yeah,
Oh,
loved it.
amazing show. And the reason
Loved
I
it.
say it's integral friendly is, as sort of an integralist with a developmental point of view, I can see how this show is engaging
Yeah,
red, amber, orange, and green
yeah.
all in healthy ways, and all folding them
It did it
together,
very well, very well. Yeah,
right? Which is something you don't see very often. I mean, the most plot lines of the majority of TV
yeah,
shows and
yeah,
films out there is some conflict between stages. Now, of course,
yeah,
the people making the movie wouldn't necessarily describe it that way, but that's really what it is. It's usually a conflict between someone at a higher stage and the evil Nazis down here that Indiana Jones
yeah,
is trying to defeat.
yeah. Well, and some big part of the quality of that show was just like goodness, decency,
Human goodness.
human goodness throughout that. And there was that, like, yeah, I was so, I mean, one is just freaking hilarious, it's just one of the funniest shows I've seen in a while, and was so relieved to have a new show like that. And I'm like, oh, it's so sad when there was no more episodes. But that was also the other thing, is just so good natured too, even in not and the humor had bite to it. It wasn't like soft,
Yeah.
goody two shoe humor, but they did an amazing job crafting that show.
Actually
And
cutting through cynicism.
cutting through
Like, we're going to
cynicism.
make a
Oof,
show that cuts through cynicism.
that is an accomplishment these days.
Huge,
Accomplishment. Yeah.
huge. And and again, like I was saying, it's not what I love about the show is that it's holding, for example, like red energy,
Yeah.
not as a negative.
Yeah.
Like, there's room for
Yeah.
healthy red here. In
Yeah.
fact, I mean, if you're playing in any competitive sport, I mean, you kind of need healthy red, and you know what I mean, in order to.
You know, what's interesting is like, yeah, now you're saying that, like thinking of Ted Lasso, that character, there's a, they portrays him as imperfect person too, for
Mhm,
sure. Okay. Yeah.
mhm.
Human, very human. But there is like we talk about development, but we're talking about waking up. We're not talking about development. That's like different things. Okay. Structures of consciousness. This is like, regardless of that. And there's like a bodhisattvic quality to him in a very simple way, that's regardless of developmental level. Like, just like, I'm going to try to be good to everybody who's around me as much as possible, like at all costs. And he kind of does that throughout the whole show, and that's partly that combination may be why it works so well in terms of being open to different developmental levels.
And seeing that, just seeing that on a screen, doesn't that make you want
Yeah.
to embody that
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
again? We are recreating here, we are recreating when we watch something like this. We are taking these themes in and claiming them for ourselves. Like, yes, this is a quality that either I have or I want more
And you
of.
know, speaking earlier, like what that art does is like we're talking about it because we tend to just think about these things, or we enjoy taking these perspectives. But like in the midst of it, it's just immediate. Again, the show's not telling you anything about how you should feel or how you should be, anything like that. But if you were to ask a person who's really appreciated the show, hey, how you feel right now? Tell me about what all the things you're feeling. Like regardless of the show, it wouldn't surprise me that they list out these things. Like that would reflect just what you said there, even if they're not aware of that. And that's what for me is good art, is because it just leaves you feeling that way without having told you to, or tried to coerce you into it. And for sure, that's how I felt, watching that. I was like, oh, we need like more seasons of this right now, big time.
And we've got one coming down the line, which
I
is great.
know,
But
that's
yeah,
so good.
I think Ted Lasso played an important role of life coach
Yeah,
for a lot of us while we were
yeah,
sort of quarantined at home,
yeah,
dealing with Corona, and
yeah,
that was a gift.
absolutely.
So,
100% agree with that.
is there anything any other particular shows or movies, and I guess what one of the things I want to talk about is what's on the horizon that you're really looking forward to.
That's a good question. I felt like it's been a little bit of a, how would you call it, a limbo,
A little
or
bit,
maybe even a purgatory of sorts,
yeah.
like with content where um just been sitting around and waiting for anything, to come up that really captures interest. I've been rewatching stuff. Listen, I've been rewatching certain things, but like Ted Lasso came up and it was like, soak it up immediately. For All Mankind, that was
Love.
another one where
Oh
that was
yeah,
like,
you and
suck
I
it up.
had a lot of back and forth about that show.
Yeah, and then the other one you recommended, Star Trek Discovery, that was another one that was really refreshing in a lot of ways, and great. So I've been enjoying the Disney Plus series.
Yep.
Like they've seemed, WandaVision was really fresh creatively,
Yep.
really interesting. Obviously there's a lot of postmodernish kind of approaches in some of the Marvel universes
Sure.
right now, which um the Loki show coming out, seeing the preview, like something about that, like the aesthetics, like almost like a what was the Will Smith alien movie?
Oh
Men
wow.
in Black.
Men in Black. I was
Well,
like,
yeah, like a Men in Black. Just like little qualities to it, like I don't
yeah.
know, like cheeky or something. And I felt I was surprised at seeing the preview for that. I'm like I actually way more interested in that. So I don't know, like there's just I'm waiting for things to come out. I know we've been in a lag because production really slowed down. Music, there's always things coming out all the time because musicians are kind of a little bit more purists in that they just create, what they
Yep.
want, and then something comes out and you never know when it's going to come out. But I'm tending to look at TVs and movies. So, um, yeah, I just like anything. Give me anything, like that'll hit the spot, and I don't really care which level. But how about you? You tend to like have a good eye on like what's coming.
Yeah, there's a few things I'm looking forward to. So at the end of the year, Matrix 4 is coming out.
Oh yes, yeah, for sure. I'm
I'm
very curious.
super curious about
And
that.
I'm not holding my breath one way or the other. I think it could be mind blowing, or maybe I'll be like, ugh, you know. So I think it's gonna be one of the two. I'm either gonna be like, whoa, or I'm gonna be like, ugh.
Which the Wachowskis have only made one movie that didn't really land for me, and that was Jupiter Ascending. And even that, it's pretty to look at, but it's just the movie didn't really thrill me.
Hmm,
Absolutely everything else they've done, I think, have been flawed masterpieces. Yes, including and especially Speed Racer, which I'm convinced was about 25 years ahead of its time,
it's funny, I never
and
saw it.
is woefully underappreciated.
Hmm,
So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Lana does
yeah,
with Matrix 4. I think
cool.
this is gonna be really cool. The other one that I'm just salivating for because it's my all-time favorite film series is the Amazon Lord of the Rings show.
Oh yeah, totally. I heard about that, so I'm all in.
They've invested like $1 billion into the show. What's kind of amazing is that it's going to be the seasons are going to have like 24 episodes, 24-hour long episodes, which totally cuts against what everyone else is doing like 9 to 13 episodes for a
Hmm,
season.
hmm,
So this is they're just dumping a ton of money into it. a ton of time into it, and it
Nice.
seems like they're really going to let this thing
Oh,
breathe.
mm,
I mean, a single season is going to be 24 hours long. What? That's
that's
crazy.
I love it. That's
It's a
yes.
world I want, it's one of those movies. There's a handful of movies where
Yep.
anytime they're on, I will watch them,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Those
we'll
movies are Lord of the
rewatch
Rings
those
at the very
often. Yeah.
top.
Yep.
Pretty much any Russell Crowe, Russell Crowe. I love
Nice.
Russell Crowe movies for some
That's
reason.
tough.
Master and Commander is one of the most perfect movies, and it's a
That's
great
awesome.
dad movie, but it's one of the most perfect movies ever made. I will watch that anytime it's on. I'll watch Gladiator
You know,
anytime it's
you remember the Key and Peele sketches where they would do the Liam Neeson bit, their two doormen outside the hotel, and they were like, Liam Neeson's.
on. Neeson's?
You bet you're Russell Crowe. Russell
Yep.
Crowe,
Russell
you're my
Crowe's?
shit.
No, I'm a total sucker for it.
Yeah.
But yeah, Lord of the Rings is one of those films where it's like,
Um, and
this is
especially
a
it,
magenta red amber universe that I love losing myself in whenever it's on.
yes, and done at masterful level. See, this is the thing. It's like it doesn't matter. Like, oh, is it the leading edge of consciousness? I don't care. But like, if it's done that well, like they did the movies, it's like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. So yeah, when I saw that, I've just been holding my breath. Like, please let this all happen and go through because we need this. We
Yeah,
need
we
this
seriously do
show.
need this. Yep, yep.
Yeah. Oh, I heard. So I see you have Neil Gaiman behind you.
Sandman, baby. They're making
Yeah,
Sandman.
yeah, and so Liz has read his books, and I'm not as familiar, but I like the vibe of it. Like Lucifer, that comedy show, kind of comedy
Yep.
ish on Netflix. I love that kind of thing,
He's
and
based on the character right from there.
yeah, totally. So I'm very curious. I don't know when it's gonna come out, but that'd be one where it could feel like it opened up like a whole new world on like TV that we can inhabit and get lost in.
No, and let me just say, I mean, for anyone who hasn't actually read the Sandman graphic novels, I call them graphic novels because that sounds more grown up than comic books. But
I think when they're that thick, you can call them a graphic novel.
no, and I mean, look at this. I mean, you can. I mean, these are bigger than Ken Wilber books,
Yeah, no, that's a
and
graphic
that's
novel.
and that's saying something. But this series is like as close as I've seen, other than some like Alan Moore works. It's as close as I've seen to the genre hitting the level of like literature, right? I
Yeah,
mean, it is
yeah.
so gorgeously written, incredibly gorgeously illustrated that I highly, highly recommend people read the Sandman series if they haven't already. I am cautiously optimistic about the show. Having read the comics, I'm not exactly sure how they can adapt that or translate it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of
but
those things where like it really depends on how much care they take in crafting the world and the characters. I'm a little bit more flexible on this kind of genre because it's my guilty pleasure kind of thing.
mhm.
But yeah, totally.
I mean, they made another one of his works, American Gods, into a show.
Yeah, and I love the first season, and I haven't got to watch
And
the
then they
second
kind of
season.
fell off, and I heard season three, but the same way, I really enjoyed the first season. Season two, I kind of just kind of lost track as it kind of
Oh,
went up its own ass a little bit.
yeah, well, and let's not forget that new season of Stranger Things is coming out, and so I love Stranger Things. So
I gotta catch up on this on Stranger Things, and that's
get
another.
out of here, Corey. How are you not caught up?
No, I know, it's terrible. I only watched the first season, so I've got.
Children of the '80s. Come on, man.
No, I know. Well, and this is the other thing about art too, is this weird nostalgia effect that it brings with it, and to the point where nostalgia is no longer just sort of this subjective experience that's kind of
Mm.
wrapped in some of the art that we love. It's actually becoming like sort of the point of a lot of art.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
like Stranger Things is here to like push the nostalgia button as
Oh
often as it
yeah.
can. And nostalgia is such a weird feeling. And going back to the first movie I mentioned the other day, Dazed and Confused.
Yeah.
Here's a movie that came out when I was in high school. It's about kids in high school from 20 years prior, kids in high school in the 70s. And now
Mm.
I'm watching it again, 25 years later, and feeling just this compounding layers of nostalgia. And what a haunted
Yeah.
feeling nostalgia is. And it's a haunting because you're feeling a desire to return to a place you can never actually return to. I've said 1,000 times in
Yeah.
these shows, when we're feeling nostalgic, we're not actually feeling nostalgic for a particular object or artifact. What we're nostalgic for is a view that we had of this
Uh-huh.
object or artifact that we
Yeah.
can no longer have because we are at a different place, at a different rung in the ladder, and you can't enact the same view the same
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. Yeah,
So it's
totally.
this haunted kind of feeling. It's like an itch you
Mhm.
can't scratch. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, and that my observation is that goes in cycles because now you have people who are our age are really established as writers and directors and producers, and they're like, "That's what we want to create. That's my childhood, so let's create that." So we get to enjoy that now, and then you know, decade from now, it'll be nostalgic stuff for the '90s that we'll see. We'll see a Stranger Things, but '90s version, and but I'm enjoying that it's our time to have the movies created for our nostalgic childhood stuff.
What will the
Yeah.
90s version be? So there'll be like flannel clothes and MC Hammer pants
Oh
and
yeah. Hey, speaking of entertainment, there's a YouTube channel called Weird History that I
mm,
really enjoy quite a lot. And they have a series called Timeline. And they've done the 70s and 80s, and right now they're doing the 90s, and each video is like 20 some minutes long, and it's like what happened in 1994.
mm,
So the 95 video just came out the other day. So this is like teenage years, for us. And but it's fat. I love it. So I recommend go and check it out. Speaking of nostalgia, go to the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And this is another form of entertainment that's totally different in educational info containment things that came online. I feel like maybe when we were teenagers a little tiny bit, but like grew over time. Like Discovery Channel came along. That was like, whoa, that was our avenue. That, but now YouTube.
before it went Ancient Aliens. Yeah.
I remember the Ancient Alien turn, dude. Like
Yeah.
where like I was really interested in alien stuff, but then after enough episodes of seeing the crazy haired dude and that meme that got generated, I don't know, therefore aliens, which is really funny now because of all the stuff coming out that's just like
Oh,
overwhelmingly
oh, geez,
like
neighbor.
when are we going to get on board with this,
That's
but yeah,
right.
I remember that time and I was like, I think it's taking a different turn.
That's
uh,
right. No,
but
there's a whole developmental track to the History Channel, which is pretty funny, which I also remember when it first came out. And it was actually, it had like documentaries on it,
it was
which was
straight up,
cool, right? It had
yeah.
actual documentaries on it. And then it had this weird phase for a few years where it was just like all Hitler all the time. It
Yeah,
was
that was total. I remember that. It was just like
nothing but Hitler documentaries. That's all. That's like all they had.
all the
And then it
time.
started getting into like the really weird crap and being like, why is this on a channel called the History Channel?
Yeah.
Those are the
the-
strange kind of the
uh,
degradation of the
I know. Yeah, but for me now, that genre is best handled by YouTubers actually overall.
totally.
Like
And I
there's so
wanted to
many
get
good channels that
yeah.
are like that I
But
really
let's
love.
let's talk about some of our favorite channels because you're right. I mean, YouTube is a perfect example of this because here is something there are a trillion different things out there all competing for your attention, and it
Yeah.
can be hard to find good channels, good sources, good fun things to do on YouTube that are actually
Yeah.
sort of enriching.
Yeah.
For example, I just watched a series on there that was going through the video game years beginning with like 1976
That's
and then year
great.
by year, here's
That's
all the
great.
games that came out, here's the platforms. And it was fascinating and very educational to just be able to kind of run through my own childhood like that. And there's a
Yeah.
number of very educational YouTube channels that I go back to at least once a week. The two I'll name right now are Veritasium, which is a
Huh.
wonderful science channel, physics, lots of physics, but fascinating. And another one called Smarter Every Day, which is another
Oh,
science channel. I
yay.
find that when I go to YouTube, I really, really like sort of orange sciency things. I'm not big into like watching TEDx presentations, stuff like that. I like watching videos that help me understand, sort
Yeah.
of the physical properties of the universe and,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
I get
totally.
really turned on by that.
Yeah, yeah. I'll throw another couple on out there. So Weird History Channel is really great. Do a great job of that. Half as Interesting is a shorter one, like 5 minutes.
Mm.
That are these like nice little chunks about really fascinating stuff. And fun, educational. And then what was the Wendover Productions is the same guy, but like longer format, like 20 or 30 minutes. And then real life lore, is that one? Real life lore, yeah. And these are like pretty big channels, like kind of millions, but
Mhm.
done really well. Like they have the ability to do it. And then all these people actually from this has emerged its own kind of Netflix thing called Curiosity.
Hmm.
Curiosity streaming, I think so. Curiosity streaming, let me just look at curiosity stream. So out of this, all these like several of these YouTubers are part of this platform, and it's really cheap, $20 a year, and you get even longer format documentary making about all kinds of subjects. So for me, this has emerged out of those times that we talked about as the clear league leaders, in terms of
Mhm.
this kind of content. And a lot of them are like, they're might be youngerish, like maybe 30s, early 30s, or something like that kind of crowd, but like super geek nerdy. I think YouTube, what's great is obviously, so these are, I think, like bigger audience, like millions of people. So I recommend them. But then, YouTube is just great because you can find the niche stuff that you're really into done really, really well.
Totally.
Randomly, sometimes I watch a channel called Foolish Baseball, and it's just some super nerd who will pull out these amazing little interesting threads of stories of stats and things like that into a really engaging presentation, because I like baseball. So every once in a while I'll turn it on. But it's like, where the hell else am I going to get that thing?
Dude, there's a dude I'm totally vibing with you right now. There's a dude,
Yeah.
there's a weird niches, right?
Yeah.
The dude on YouTube I love watching, and his whole thing is what he does is he gets a hold of old military rations. Like
I
we're talking
know.
like
I've watched him.
World War II
Yes, I've
rations,
watched
right?
him.
And he will open them up and
Yes.
eat them. Well, when they're safe to eat, right? He's got this whole methodology to determine when,
Yeah.
and he eats them and he
Fascinating.
reports his finding. And I cannot stop watching this
Dude,
stuff.
I went down the rabbit hole with that guy one night, and it's really done really well. It's not just like a jackass, it's
Right.
not like that. No, it's like
This
it's
is
really
a dude who
informative.
cares about this topic,
It's really
right?
informative. Like, wow, he found this stuff. He really, really cares about it. He has a lot of information. And then of course it's just fascinating. It's like, holy shit, this guy's gonna eat beef stew from 1920.
I saw him eat biscuits from the Civil War, and I'm just like, this is. I feel like you're inventing a whole new school, like
Yeah.
gastronomic archaeology or
Yeah. I mean,
or
I think
something
what's
like
great
that.
here is that like, who's the astronaut guy? Or not astronaut. He worked for let me just, this is really great. The glitter box guy, glitter bomb. Um, he was an engineer and asked Mark Rober. This guy is
Hmm.
wonderful. He's got millions of views. He used to be an engineer at NASA, and super super fun, but also educational. Like, he had this thing which is he's really known for. People were stealing stuff off of his porch and other people around him and catching on cameras, and he wanted to find a way to, get a little revenge, but done like through science. And so he ended up creating this crazy glitter bomb box. It's like in a box, it's in a package. It looks like a total real package, but he can trace it all. He can track where it's going. It has 4 cameras inside that the people can't see, that are cell phones transmitting the data. And when they open it, it just spews all this fine glitter everywhere in their car. It
That's evil.
sprays it sprays out fart smell stuff that's really horrible. It has Home Alone in there, like, take that, you filthy animal, like everything. And this is fun. He also created this massive squirrel obstacle course in his backyard.
I saw that one.
Yeah, this is
I
him.
saw that one.
So these kinds of things are really amazing, where like I feel like I learn a lot. Like if this was around when I was in high school, I would have
Totally.
learned way more,
Totally.
remembered it, internalized it. So I think this is probably a gift of the age we're in, is that like just so much cooler ways and entertaining ways to learn about stuff,
Yep.
and to allow people who are really geeky into it to create the content to deliver it to us. So YouTube right now, hard to beat in terms of what it does.
Dude, YouTube, I mean, it's crazy because it can be so unexpected, right? You come
Yeah.
across something, you're like, I didn't expect to enjoy this as much as I did, and I just find I can't take myself away from it. So, like, for example, I often find myself watching videos of people who take old machines, old lathes, things
Yeah.
like that are rusty and run down,
Yeah.
and I watch them completely take it apart lovingly and clean all the
Yeah.
parts and get rid of the rust and reassemble it and repaint it, and it's like
And
all
talk
this.
about appreciation.
Yeah.
Like what
Oh,
we were talking about, where we started with,
yeah.
like the appreciation is immediate, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You get an aesthetic hit from it. You get sort of this engineering hit from it. Like I want to understand how these things
Yeah.
work and all these pieces come to. I
Yeah.
want to understand. One of the things I love watching about the guy who eats military rations is
Yeah.
like the history of it. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I lived in the town in Massachusetts that has
Yeah.
the factory that
Right.
created these candies that
Right.
went into these rations. And, and it's the same thing I do actually when I watch a movie. I get really turned on by sort of the
Yeah.
lower right quadrant. So whenever I watch a movie, I always immediately go to IMDb. I look up every person who was involved in that movie. All the actors. I want to see what their careers were. I want to see like what was going on in the director's life, and and
Yeah.
even for like crappy obscure. I
Yeah.
grew up on Mystery Science Theater, so I've watched. I've learned how to appreciate really bad movies. Right, there's a
Yeah.
place for that too, and
Yeah.
because all of these the worst movie that you're gonna watch was a labor of love for somebody.
So, yeah,
And I'm
totally.
so curious about that love and about that labor that I just
Yeah.
find myself researching these guys with like ultra fine granularity, because it's like I want to know what drove you to make this weird ass movie. Like, what was your vision? Why did you think there was an
Yeah.
audience for that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I get so
Absolutely.
fascinated by this.
I think but that's great though. Is like these days, like we get to be more intimate. Where like, man, when we were growing up, if you had a behind the scenes in the DVD,
That's
or
right.
like, I don't even know if they had that stuff with VHS tapes before DVD. I can't remember, but that was like, whoa. But now we can really get intimate with how it was all made, and that's one of my favorite parts about watching shows and movies, is like find out all the additional stuff, from surrounding it.
Yep.
Yeah. Well,
Totally.
yeah, yay for YouTube.
Yeah, man. No, YouTube's
And
a great and scary platform.
I can plug my new YouTube channel since we're
Ooh.
learning effing language.
Yeah, look, I tell you, man, that article, Anne, is still like
It allows imagination.
it does allow imagination.
Let's imagine that was intentional. So you're filling in with what you want. But hey, if you're see, this is an example. Like if this is what you're doing, learning languages, well then there's YouTube channels.
No, and I highly recommend people check this out, Ryan. I think that you're tapping into like a really cool and fun way for people
Thanks, dude.
to learn languages. I
I
mean, and
appreciate it.
that's really cool. And I know that you have had this, practically a lifelong fascination with language.
Yeah, and I watch, I watch a lot of other language learning YouTubers and stuff. And this is like a whole world. There's a whole community, a whole world, but that's what I'm into. But like I feel like whatever you're into, you can find a loving community who's just passionate about that
Absolutely.
content, creating engaging, entertaining
Yep.
videos,
Well said.
Nice, dude. Well,
All right, dude. Anything else we want to throw on the table?
I think we threw a lot on there. Feels
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Well, I guess the my final invitation for people is, again, if you haven't already, go watch the Grace and Grit movie. We really want to
Yeah,
know what
definitely.
you guys think, and if you liked it, let's keep those user scores trending up on places
Yeah.
like Metacritic and on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah,
Leave
balance
a
out those
review. It makes a big difference. It really, as particularly for
for this show.
independent films like this, it makes
Yeah.
a really big difference.
Yes.
So we encourage you to watch, to leave a review, and come to the Integral Life community and let us know what you thought.
Yeah, 100%.
Cool, man.
Cool.
All right, Ryan. Well, this
That was
is
fun.
a lot of fun, dude.
Had a good time. Well,
Yeah, man.
thanks everybody for being here too.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll catch you next time.
Toodaloo.
Bye.